I call the Honourable Member Claire Curran.
Mr Chair, I'm pleased to take a call on Part 2 of the Telecommunications Bill, and I'd like to address an issue which lies at the very heart of this bill, of the Act within which it resides, and the principles upon which it should rest, which is the principle of competition for the long-term benefit of end users or consumers, which are the people of New Zealand. And I'd like to make some remarks, Mr Chair, on Part 2 before I get into the substance of it and some of the supplementary order papers, the amendments which Labor is putting up on this bill, on this part of the bill, about the concept of competition and the concept of investment. And first of all, I'd like to say that when investors come to this country, they should know a couple of things. And first is that their investment is welcome, and that the environment that they're investing in is a sound and stable one, that the regulatory and legislative environment is based on the sound principles of that thing, competition for the benefit of long-term benefit of end users. And secondly, that there are expectations that in this country corporate interests aren't put higher than consumers' service and affordability, that they're not put lower either, but that competition is critical. Because in the telecommunications market, that's what we need, and that is rigorous competition in order for it to be successful. And I hope that during this debate that there is reference to the importance of this and the importance placed on this by the previous Labor government, and within which the digital strategy sat, and that this bill arose out of, the Act arose out of. One of the things that I'd like to say that is missing from this debate, this whole debate, and which is the other side of the equation, and if the Minister is pleased to take a call at some point during this part of the bill, I'd like to hear his views on that, and which is the reasons why people connect to fibre, to high-speed broadband, and why they do it. Because while there has been some, I suppose, voicing given to this, there hasn't been a great deal of substance given to it during the whole of this 2.5 years of discussion around ultra-fast broadband and how this network will roll out. Is that why are people going to connect to it, and what's going to drive them to make that decision? And it's called content, which is the important issue, demand, what people can use the high-speed broadband connections for, and what's going to motivate them to move to make that switch from copper to fibre. The Minister, as I said, hasn't seriously addressed this issue. He doesn't appear to be hugely interested in that bigger vision, and is strangely silent on any consideration of how the content industry might fit into it and what the regulatory environment might look like in that content industry, unless, as it could be feared, it's about cementing the way for further monopolies in that content sector as well. New Zealand can only realise its potential as a nation of technological innovation if our population is digitally literate and has clear pathways into future education and high-wage, high-skilled jobs. The traditional broadcasting sector is transforming and merging with what's been called the telecommunications and ICT sector. We don't have a new term for that sector yet. It is known around the world as convergence. It still hasn't really been named other than being described as the digital environment and the fact that the two sectors are coming together. Increasingly, content in that digital environment is crossing the technological platforms, and traditional broadcasting as we know it is now rapidly becoming obsolete, and the digital environment is the future. Content describes the creative material that New Zealanders produce, not just in New Zealand, obviously. Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Claire Curran.
And it's delivered in that digital environment across all mediums, and it includes films, programs, news, current affairs, music and games, etc., delivered via all those platforms, whether they're television, radio, the internet and in print. And it's only going to be successful if people choose to access it and see its potential for the future. And to do that, you need access to quality, diversity of content, and you need competition. Adequate competition, which goes to part 2 of this bill, and the importance of providing and making sure that there is real competition involved. And before I carry on, I'd just like to mention one of the important amendments that Labour has put up to part 2 of the bill, which is to amend new section 156 AD and insert a new clause, which essentially goes to the importance of what is called the equivalence of inputs, which I will talk about in a minute, which is essentially going to allow that competition to occur on the network itself, on the platforms on which the content resides. And what we are saying is that competition should be allowed to occur from the outset, rather than from the 1st of January 2020, which, Mr Chair, is a long way away. And in this environment where the technology is so rapidly changing, the ability to have that competition both at the network level, the delivery of the platforms on which the content resides, and then in the content industry, traditionally known as the broadcasting industry, is so important. So therefore, Mr Chair, the industries should be being looked at as one rather than as two, and that this discussion that we're having around broadband and the rollout of broadband should also include the content industry, and that is what is missing from the discussion in this debate. I would like, Mr Chair, to go to specifically the open access regime, which Labour in its minority report on the bill before us had a number of comments to make, because we consider that the open access undertaking provisions for ultra-fast broadband is severely flawed, as they explicitly exclude price and non-price terms for bottleneck services. The limited form of Commerce Commission oversight was discussed at great length at the Select Committee, and we believe that what has been provided for in this bill is not a true substitute for a real open access regime. The undertaking provisions don't provide the service providers to achieve the equivalence of inputs, the standard that is currently applied to telecom, and as a result there is a real risk that a service provider could provide itself or individual access seekers with better ultra-fast broadband services and more attractive prices compared to others, which is one of the reasons why we are opposing this bill, because it is a core issue. It goes to competition, it goes to the ability of real competition to occur, and it goes to the fear which lies at the heart of Labour's opposition, which is that there will be monopolistic practices, there will be the ability for price gouging to occur, and there is history, Mr Chair, in this area, which we can, and I hope to later on, outline in detail for the House. As a result, as I said, there's a real risk that there won't be able, that the service providers could provide itself or individual access seekers with better ultra-fast broadband services and more attractive prices compared to others. This behaviour would be anti-competitive, and under this law there isn't any remedy to challenge it until the 30th of December 2019, which is why we have put this amendment before the House today. So we think there must be sufficient incentives for service providers to comply with undertakings, which is why we put up a previous amendment which got voted down in the previous part of this bill around the fines that can be and the penalties which can be made.
I call the Honourable